My apologies, everyone. I logged in late. I had a meeting run long. So we'll just jump right into it. As people filter in, I sent out a message letting everybody know that I was late. So I'll just get into it, save everybody the time. Some admin stuff. Tomorrow, the Sovereign Summit closes. So registration closes for Sovereign Summit tomorrow. So if you're still looking to get your ticket, or you know anybody that would benefit from the Sovereign Summit, make sure to get that registration in before tomorrow, because I will be closing that registration to make sure that we can start getting all the logistics figured out. Not figured out. We already have it figured out, but squaring it away. Other than that, hope you guys are enjoying the portal. I know I am. I like having that landing page. And these calls are something that we're going to continue to do every Thursday at 11. So if you aren't able to join live, like some of you are, because it's kind of in the middle of the day or time differences or whatever, the recordings are generally up the following weekend. We also are going to start moving these to YouTube each quarter. So we'll be loading them week by week, so people outside of the portal can benefit from it and realize how great this portal is and start joining and adding more flavor to our community. And so we'll be doing that as well. So the first one drops April 1st. And that's the first January call that we did when we released the portal at the beginning of this year. And then we'll just move out week to week from there. So hold on. Today's fitness. So fitness is something that we all have to deal with, whether we like it or not. And the topic that we have today is something that I think is overlooked often, which is fitness, health, workouts as we age and aging gracefully. I've talked with Tish and Matt about this a lot. Aging gracefully is something that Tish focuses on a lot with her powerlifting clients. She helps a lot of master class powerlifters. And so some additional hurdles come with age, right? Things change, the way we approach things change, people's bodies change, how we process different foods change, our priorities change. And so when we talk about aging gracefully, right, like when you have a 20, 25-year-old kid, and I say kid, but, person, and maybe they care more about lifting really, really heavy or ego lifting, or maybe they're into bodybuilding. Their process of lifting for fitness is going to be very different than somebody that's in their 70s and 80s, just trying to make sure that they are capable of functioning. Their diets are going to be completely different. Their supplements are going to be completely different. How the body processes foods and vitamins and minerals is going to be completely different. And so it's something that gets overlooked because we paint with a broad brush, and we look at things from a perspective of one size fits all, right? So if I, ate a bunch of protein every day as a 20-year-old man, and it's, red meat protein, then as an 80-year-old man, maybe red meat protein, 200 grams of protein every day is going to be the same, and it just isn't. And so as you age, you have to be very intentional about how you're changing what your body needs and keeping an eye on what your body needs. And you can do this through blood work. I think blood work at least quarterly, if not once a year at the very minimum, is super critical, because it gives you an idea of what your body's doing. And so as you age, what I've seen a lot of people do, and then they start applying it backwards on the fame side of the house. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger is a great example. He spent his entire 20s, 30s, and 40s eating red meat and chicken, drinking beer, and having this lean, immaculate physique. And then he gets into his 60s and 70s and he starts going vegan and telling people they should go vegan. And the reality is your body's not going to process meat the same way as you get older. And so going vegan when you're older may work for you, but when you're younger, you still have these prime enzymatic systems that are going to need animal fats. They're going to need proteins. They'll need leucine and to break it down. And so this idea that we see a lot of, and this goes in a lot of areas, but in fitness, we see a lot of people getting up in age and saying, oh, I've never felt better because I'm doing this thing. And then they start trying to apply it to a younger generation, and it just doesn't track well. And so as you're getting older, not only do you need to be aware of and cognizant that your diet is going to change, you need to be aware and cognizant that you shouldn't be pushing people to your diet that may work for you, especially if they're outside of your age bracket, right? So like, again, going back to Arnold Schwarzenegger as an anecdotal story, right? Like, he was on a ton of steroids as a younger man. He was eating red meat and chicken constantly, or drinking protein shakes constantly. He was working out 6 to 7 days a week for multiple hours, sometimes twice a day. Those kind of systems of breakdown and recovery, they're going to need a different diet. And as he gets older, he's only working out 3 to 5 times a week. He's only working out once a day. He's working out very differently. He's not lifting for heavy weights. He's not lifting for aesthetics. He's just lifting to stay heavy or to stay healthy. And so he can afford to not eat as much protein. He can afford to not eat as much animal products, because his body is not actively breaking down muscle. His body is not actively processing that food the same way. But it would be and is a detriment to think that how it works for one person is exactly how it works for you. And I see this a lot in the fitness industry. So you really do have to start looking at your diet a little bit more holistically. You have to start looking at it a little bit more like, or from the perspective of, what do I want to achieve, right? So like always, and I talk about this a lot, what is your outcome? Like, what is your ideal? What is your success criteria? And so when you're working out at a higher age, you have to look at what your outcome is. Is it just to stay healthy? Is it to stay active? Is it to look lean? Is it to look great for your age? Is it more than that, right? Matt talks about it a lot. He's a bodybuilder. And so he's, up there in age, which he'll tell you, and I'm trying to be delicate because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here, but he wants to look better than 20-year-olds. That's his goal. Like, that's what he wants. He likes that. So his process, his approach is going to be vastly different than somebody who just wants to be able to stand up from the couch without pain or without getting winded, or to be able to catch themselves when they fall, which you hear a lot about. Right. And one of the things that I get frustrated with, as I'm in my 30s, and a lot of people that I'm around are in their 30s, is this idea and this myth that as you get older, your body just starts breaking down, and that's just the way it is. That's just not the way it is. That's what we've been conditioned to believe, but that's just not the way it is. If you continue to work towards your outcome, you can circumvent a lot of that negative aging process. And so when you're looking at your diet, start with your outcome. What are you trying to get? And then from there, start testing, right? Start testing. What are you eating, and how does it make you feel, right? If you eat a lot of carbs and it makes you feel heavy, then maybe you back off the carbs and add a little bit more fats. If you're eating a lot of protein, it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, maybe back off the protein a little bit and add a little bit more carbs or add a little bit more fats. It's a lot of plug and play. It's a lot of adjustments in real time. Otherwise you end up not being intentional. And then if you're looking at removing it, and again, this is getting real deep into the weeds on this, but more than happy to have this conversation inside the portal. If you're looking to remove, like, to use that example, maybe proteins are making you feel uncomfortable or bloated, or they just sit real heavy, and so you're backing off the protein and you're adding in more carbs. Be mindful of what nutrients you're losing by backing out protein, right? Because protein, especially animal fat protein, animal protein, beef, chicken, fish, they come with a lot of nutrients that you're not going to get from a plant. They're going to come with a lot of nutrients that you're not going to get from a carb. And so you need to start re-adding that and introducing that in. Just real quick highlight: iron, calcium, leucine, amino acids. These are things that you get from animal fats and proteins that you're not going to get from your carbs and your vegetables at as high a quantity, or as dense a quantity. And so things like magnesium, these are things you can go and get supplements for. So if proteins are not processing well, you can get multivitamins, or you can get single vitamins that you can take in order to supplement that in so that you're not losing as much from that lack of protein or from the lack of processing of protein. Same thing with carbs, right? If you're going to add protein and back off carbs, you're not going to lose as much. There's not as many nutrient dense carbs out there that you're going to lose a lot and you're going to have to supplement for, but there is some, right? You're going to have to find something to fill the gap in your calories. And so as you get older, become very mindful of that, right? Outcome. What are your hurdles? What are you dealing with? What are your assets? And when I say hurdles, I mean, are you injured? Do you have mobility difficulties? Do you have gut health issues? Do you have any lagging ailments, meaning they're not curing themselves, they're just kind of sticking around, a cough, chest pains, windedness, things like that? Keep an eye on those things as you age, because those are all symptomatics. They're all things that will pour into what it is that you need to identify to make a healthy choice. And then, going from the diet, once you kind of figure out what your diet is, you can start talking about how you're going to remain active. Is it just walking? Is it lifting heavy weights? I'm a big proponent of lifting heavy weights well into your 70s and 80s, because it primes the body. There's a lot of things that happen inside the body by creating explosivity and lifting heavy, adaptability, dexterity, mobility. These are things that you can actually develop well into your 80s. There's plenty of stories out there of people in their 90s and hundreds running marathons or doing marathons. And it's only possible because they were intentional about, I want to go do a marathon. It had nothing to do with age. It's just the intentionality. And socially speaking, I think, again, speaking to that myth of like your body starts to fail you with age, we also have life changes that there's a myth that you won't have specific things available to you and you should just give up, i.e. becoming a parent. There's a myth that because you're a parent, it's okay to get fat, it's okay to get weak, it's okay to not work out or prioritize your health. But in reality, as a parent, it's more critical than ever that you maintain a certain level of physical fitness, because you're there to foster a proper relationship with physical exercise and health for your children, but also to be there, longevity, right? Like these are things that you can gain and garner from a positive nutritional base and a positive fitness base. Is you can actually start developing productivity and functionality within that. And so when you're talking about, we covered diet, and again, this is a very vast subject. We covered diet as to age gracefully, but what about functional practices of programming? And again, I believe in lifting weights. There's something that happens chemically and enzymatically within your system that is not going to be found anywhere else but lifting heavy weights. And so I'm a big proponent of that. But also, if you're struggling with balance, some things that really help with balance, because as people get older, that's one of the number one things people complain about, is they lose their balance a lot. Hip flexors and ankle mobility are two of the number one reasons elderly fall, because they can't catch themselves anymore. They can't, taking a step is no longer strengthened side to side. And so they just fall over, right? And that isn't to dismiss the elderly. I'm not trying to make them sound like they're just completely helpless, because they're not. But if you're not going to intentionally develop your hip flexibility, your hip strength, as well as your ankle strength and mobility, you're going to be at a higher risk of just falling over, because it just can't catch itself. And I got an early dose of that, right? Like the reason that I started getting into fitness was because I wasn't working out. I was eating like crap. I was treating my body terribly. I had a sedentary job. I was over 300 pounds, just above 300 pounds rather. And I took a step down the stairs and my leg locked up and I just fell down the stairs. And when I went to the doctor, he just said, you just don't have the muscle mass to carry the weight. And so that's what ends up when we're elderly. We may only weigh a stark 85 pounds, right? And so we may not think about it as weight, but if you don't develop the muscles to hold 85 pounds, and with inertia and momentum, maybe 100 pounds, 120 pounds, then your body's just going to collapse in on itself because it doesn't have the muscularity to hold it together. And so whatever your outcome is, your functional training should be around that, right? If your functional outcome that you're looking for is, I don't want to fall over when I walk, I want strong hips, strong ankles, strong knees so that I can keep myself upright. Should I trip? Should I fall? Should I lose my balance or get dizzy? Then you're going to be doing a lot of work on your lower half. You're going to do a lot of mobility work, a lot of stretching, a lot of flexibility, but you're also going to be doing a lot of strength training on your lower half. You're going to be working on those hip flexors, adductors, abductors. You're going to be working on your quads and your hamstrings. You're going to be working on your calves and your ankles. And so if you want to be upright and maintain upright longevity, then that's how you do it, is you build the bottom half, you build that foundation. If you want to take it a step further, like Matt, and be better than most 20-year-olds, then you're going to have to work very, very diligently at progressive overload. Progressive overload is a tempo-based system where you add extra weight over time and you build strength and adaptability over time. It can start very low, right? It is still progressive overload to go from 5 pounds to 8 pounds to 10 pounds, no different than it is progressive overload to go from 150 pounds to 200 pounds to 225. Right? People get their egos wrapped up in it and they're like, oh, it's not progressive overload unless it's over this weight. It's like, no, progressive overload is going from a starting point and incrementally increasing that weight until you get to a point where your outcome is met or your success criteria is met. And so, one of the things that's really overlooked when it comes to aging is the necessity of muscle is no longer there. And when I say the necessity is, we start looking at it as like, oh, I'm just an old man, I'm just an old woman. I don't need to be able to run a quarter mile. I don't need to be able to lift a heavy weight. I don't need to be able to do these things because I'm old. And then, as a result, people start to decay. People start to lose that functionality. And so I would challenge each person, if you are in that aging category, if you are looking to age gracefully, to remind yourself that the necessity, while it may not be as critical as it once was when you were in your 20s and 30s, whatever, because you're getting older, it's still just as critical to certain success criteria, meaning I want to be able to walk. I want to be able to be functional. I want to be able to be there for my grandkids, lift them up, right? There's this really great video that I love watching, and it's this older man, and he's literally taking a kettlebell and he's lifting it above his head, and he's sitting down and squatting, and he's lifting above his head, and he just keeps doing that over and over and over again. And this video, it progresses and progresses and progresses, and it's like a little weight and then a bigger weight and then a little weight and then a bigger weight, and it just keeps going. And then finally it ends with him picking up his granddaughter or grandson, I can't remember, above his head. And he's able to pick up this child from a squatting position, getting down to where the child is and lifting the child above his head. So for him, his success criteria had nothing to do with lifting Olympically. It wasn't about powerlifting. It wasn't about strength. It wasn't about ego. It was literally a simple mechanism of, I want to be able to control my body well enough to get down to a squat position, pick up my grandchild, and lift that grandchild above my head over and over and over again. That was enough to keep that person on a path of success, of lifting that kettlebell, progressively overloading that kettlebell over time to get to a point where they can lift that child above their head and feel good about it. And so when you're looking at your programming, when you're looking at how you want to develop your strength, you have to start from a position of what is your success criteria, because it's going to iterate the rest of your programming, right? Now, if you're somebody that is like Matt, or you're somebody that's like Tish, and you're into powerlifting, or you're into bodybuilding, or you're into putting 30-year-olds into their place because you want to be stronger than them, that's a different outcome than the person who just wants to lift the grandchild above their head. And so as you get older, I think a lot of people get stuck in this mentality of all or nothing, and they go with nothing, right? Because I can't lift the 300 pounds, because I can't lift all this weight, because I can't do all this stuff, these 20-year-olds, then I won't do anything. And then they suffer. They fall more often. They're more prone to breaking bones because they don't have the nutrients. They're more prone to slips, trips, and falls. And so because they're lacking nutrients and functionality, it has a heavier punishment on them than somebody like myself. Like if I fall, I might get an abrased hand, but I'm not going to break a bone. I'm not going to, end up breaking a hip, right? Which is a joke now. People make that as a joke, but it's not a joke. It's a real thing. The reason they break their hip isn't because they're old. The reason they break their hip is because they lack the nutrients and the strength to be able to develop the resiliency in elderly age. And so if you want that longevity, your programming should be to build a structure. And I'm a big believer that as you get older, lower half foundational strength training is highly critical. Ankle, calf, hamstring and quad, hip mobility. Those things will keep you upright and safe so that if you slip or you trip or you fall, you'll be able to catch yourself without breaking something. And then dietarily eat for creating a sound body. That means calcium, iron, magnesium, zinc, right? Like it helps your immune system, but it also helps your bone health. So we've covered the dietary changes that are going to happen, right? And making sure that it's aligned with not only where you are as a body and testing that out, but also like where you want to go and what your outcomes are. We've covered kind of your programming, your strength training, what you should be going for, whether that outcome is, whatever that outcome is, how to build out that training. And we can talk till the cows come home on the weeds on that, because like every single person is going to have a different mechanism based on their outcomes, their history, their assets and liabilities, like as far as like what are their lagging ailments, do they have, you know, ankle mobility issues that are because you broke your ankle 15 times or over the course of your life or whatever, right? Things start to stack up and you have to take that into consideration. And I have notes, so bear with me. I want to make sure I hit everything. Recovery. So I want to move into recovery and I almost skipped it. So I'm glad I looked at my notes. So recovery is something that I have a negative relationship with, because I'm a 20, 30-year-old guy. I don't really care about recovery because my body kind of heals on its own. So stretching, mobility, ice baths and Epsom salt baths and things like that, like I hate them. I can't stand them. I won't do them. That's my personal proclivity. But I will tell you as a professional, they're absolutely necessary as you get older. They become even more necessary as you get older, because the reality is the systems that you have as 20, 30-year-old to break down lactic acid, to process muscle soreness and delayed onset muscle soreness, the systems that you have to enzymatically recover slow down as you get older. And so as you get older, they become more necessary, almost more necessary than strength training in a lot of cases, because as your mobility slows down and your recovery systems slow down, so too do your strength gains. So too does your ability to remain equipped to go and lift, right? And so for me, I can wake up tomorrow after a leg day and be absolutely destroyed sore and still function and walk and go and do what I need to do. And that's fine. But as a 6-year-old, the likelihood is my body's no longer processing lactic acid anymore the proper way, or as fast. And so if I wake up tomorrow sore, that's my day. I'm not getting out of bed. I'm not going to go do anything unless I have mechanisms to recover. So if I know I'm going to do a leg day and I know I'm 60 years old and normally a leg day destroys me, then that night I'm getting in an Epsom salt bath and I'm stretching in the Epsom salt bath and I'm stretching after the Epsom salt bath while the muscles are warm and pliable, so that the next day I'm still going to be sore, but I'm not going to be nearly as sore as I would have been had I not done those extra steps. So recovery becomes a lot more, your relationship with recovery as you age needs to become more intentional, just like your diet and your programming, but it becomes more imperative. You will find yourself as you age, and I've experienced this with all of my aging clients, especially new to workout aged clients, because they have a period where they didn't work out and then they jump into it. And on top of them having an underdeveloped system, they also have an underdeveloped system in a not ideal situation where their body's no longer processing lactic acid as effectively, it's not recovering as effectively, their immune systems are taking a hit. And so sometimes the workout becomes the recovery. And what I mean by that is when I'm programming, if I have a client who, you know, is just not recovering well, then I may program a day where it's like, hey, we're not lifting today, we're stretching today. We're not putting a bunch of weight on the bar. We're just using it to help us fundamentally adapt the body to the stretch, right? I may put, if you're used to deadlifting, say 60 pounds, I may only put 20 pounds and just say, hey, stretch the hamstrings. We'll do the same movement, but stretch it. It's not a static stretch. It's going to be a dynamic stretch, but it's going to be a different system, right? We're going to move the body a little bit differently. And what you find is as you age, if you start to focus on your recovery a little bit more, your strength is going to go up. your longevity is going to go up. Your confidence in your body movement is going to go up. One of the things that I see a lot is jumping. As you age, you do not jump. The reason you do not jump is because you're afraid if you jump, you're going to fall. So what you do, and I recommend this for anybody that's scared of jumping at an older age, right? If you're watching this and you're like, yeah, I fucking won't jump. Like, I'm not doing it. Your progressive overload is going to be 1 inch step up, curb height step up, so 3 to 5 inch step up, move to a large, like 12-inch step up, alternating between legs as if you're just kind of like walking stairs, and then go back down to a 6 to 8 inch. And instead of a step up, jump 6 to 8 inches. Be okay with falling, put pillows around if you need, or mattresses or whatever, padding, but work on jumpability. If you work on jumpability at an old age, it automatically strengthens your hip mobility, automatically strengthens your knee mobility, and automatically strengthens your ankle mobility. Over time, if you can get at 60, 70 years old, the ability to jump up onto a 2-foot box, you are going to be night and day different in the way you carry yourself, the way you walk, the way you move in any space. And it will exponentially change the way you lift. It will also change the way you catch yourself, because as you get older, your equilibrium is one of the first things that people say go. And it's because your inner ear starts to break down. That's why we get hearing loss. That's why we get your inner ear starts to break down, which messes with your equilibrium. But if you're strong enough and your ankle, knee, and hip mobility is strong enough, even when you lose your equilibrium, you'll just stay. But the problem that we have as we age, the myth, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail before we end the call, the myth is that it's because you're aging. No, it's because you're not using it. So if you use it and you want to stay still, you're going to lose that dizziness, but you're going to just kind of rock, as opposed to as you rock, now you fall because you have nothing to counteract you. You have no muscularity to counteract you. And we have slipping in bathtubs, we have slipping on or tripping on curbs, and then all of a sudden they're in the hospital for 3 weeks. We see that a lot in our society, and that is a combination of loss of strength combined with a loss of nutrients within the body, coupled with a lack of recovery. I mean, it all works together. It's very, very dominant when you start looking at it. And so my hope is, if you're listening to this, is it triggers you to realize, one, it's not because you're old. It's because you don't use it. It drives me nuts when people tell me they're getting old. You know how it is. You hit 30 and your whole body hurts. No, I don't know how it is, because I hit 35 years ago and I don't hurt because I work to not hurt. And sometimes that's a good enough reason to do something, right? Like, I grew up, my grandmother was in pain the last 20 years of her life. I remember that. She had these menthol patches just to get through the day. She had them wrapped around her fingers. She had them wrapped around her elbows and joints because she was just in immense pain all the time. I don't want that for anybody. I love my grandmother to death. Like, she was the nicest and greatest person in the world, and she never complained. But I knew she was in a lot of pain. And I don't want that for people. And the way you avoid that is you use it. You function, and you give up this idea that it's because you're old that you're struggling. Age is just a number, as my mom loves to say. Age is just a number, and it is. It's what you do with it. And so part of the myth is there's no threshold where you lose something. There's no like, okay, now you're 30, you're going to be in pain all the time. Now you're 50, you're no longer going to recover. Now you're 60. That's all bullshit. In my opinion, it's a myth that people tell to sell drugs, pharmaceuticals, and fad diets. That's all it is. But the mechanisms are the same. It's just it needs to be adjusted and fine-tuned as you get older. But the methods are the same. Get working, eat a nutrition-dense diet that makes sense for your outcome, your use, and make sure that whatever your outcome is, you're doing functional training to get there, right? That never changes. It doesn't matter if you're 100 years old or 15 years old. Like, that never changes. Yet somehow along the way, we've been convinced that once we hit 60, diet doesn't matter, functional training doesn't matter, working out doesn't do anything for you. You're just old. That's bullshit. Absolute bullshit. My parents have probably lived the most unhealthy lifestyle I could ever think of. And they are almost 70, and you couldn't get them to sit still for a minute because they refuse to give up their mobility freedom. So they work at it. They eat like shit and they drink all the time, and they don't really give a fuck about their lungs or anything like that. But muscularly, they work on being functional, and that's important. And so the juxtaposition between what society says is old age and what we deem as possible, not possible as old age, is vastly starkly contrasted against what is true if you put in the work. And I hear a lot of people, and this is another myth, well, they're special. The 100-year-old that ran a marathon, they're special. You know, the 90-year-old who started lifting heavy, they're special. They're not special. They're just intentional. They chose to be that person. Every one of you, whether you're 25 now or 75 just getting started, or 90 just getting started, you can make that choice too. But take an assessment of where you are and where you want to go, become intentional about it, and you will get there. You just gotta do it. And give up this idea and this notion that you're where you're at because of your age. You're not. You're where you're at because of how you choose to use your age, how you choose to use your body at that age, right? It is a big pet peeve of mine when people are like, well, you know how it is when you're 80, blah, blah, blah. No, I don't. When I'm 80, I plan to be a fucking superhero. So, and I have people in my life like Matt and Tish who are not that old, but they have the same mentality, and I just follow them because they'll be superheroes when they're at that age. So I know it's possible. Like I said, my dad's almost 70. He's still a fucking superhero to me. So I know it's possible. And I want you all to know that it's possible too. So that's kind of why I wanted to share this and break those myths. You're only as old as you allow yourself to be.
Those are all great tips, great points. Just sharing I have a client who just shared the other day. She's a 70-year-old who does powerlifting movements, just doesn't compete. And she ended up going outside the other day with her dog. They have a big mastiff type thing. It ended up chasing a rabbit, whatever it was. And so she had the leash, ended up letting it go. She kind of like stepped 3 or 4 steps, caught herself kind of at the car at that point, and survived. And then was like, she never went to ground. And she was sharing with me, and she was like, it's that piece of being in the gym that saved me. Because she's like, I saw it in my mind. I was going to fall, and I was going to face plant it, and I was going to break both my shoulders because of the positioning that she was in, kind of going downhill. And she's like, but I didn't. I caught myself. It was a stumble step, 2 or 3 stumble steps. And so, a little out of whack, joint wise, whatever, but she caught herself. And she was like, that's really a valid piece of like, being in the gym and getting some work done. And she doesn't try to beast anything out. She just does some moderate weights to keep herself happy. And that's the result, the real life things of the dog takes a pull for a second, and you're caught off guard, but you can survive it. You didn't end up with 2 broken shoulders in a hospital and laid out because you couldn't handle a dog.
And that's I feel like functional training as a term has been conflated with some ideology or some fancy mechanism or trend, right?
Some trend in the gym, yeah.
Right, but reality, that's what functional training is. And
right.
Wherever you are, and it doesn't matter age or whatever, when you say functional training, it should come with that type of understanding. Is like, what is the function that my functional training is to do, right? Like I do functional training. Now I'm 30 years old, 35 years old. I do functional training to be an absolute badass warrior because that's how I was raised. I'm ready to fight at any moment. That's why I train. I have the longevity and the endurance and the wherewithal to know how long I can last in a ring with somebody. Right. And so when I train for functional training, it's like, okay, if I have to pull myself up on a rock, if I have to lift a car, if I have to, save my people, then I need to be able to do those things. My functional training is vastly different than somebody who's like, I just want to be able to walk my mastiff. And if he pulls me, know that I'm not going to just get dragged across the ground. Like,
right.
your functional training should be just that. Functional has a meaning, and that is, what is your function? Right. I said the story earlier. I shared the story earlier of that video of the old man. His functional training was lifting a kettlebell above his head. Why? Because he wanted to be able to bend down, pick up his grandchild, and lift the grandchild over and over again above his head.
Right.
That's enough function. Now, the benefit of that, the benefit of all of that is that training of him trying to pick up his grandchild is going to develop the same muscles that is going to keep him from falling over when he catches himself. It's going to give him the strength to do the stutter step. It's going to give him the strength to grab things out of the cabinet without dropping them on his face. It's going to give him the endurance to be able to walk long distances. Those are tertiary benefits that he doesn't have to sit down and say, this is what I want to do. But because the movement and the action of that one function of getting down and picking a child up who's maybe 30, 40 pounds is going to give the added benefit on the outside of that of unintentional consequences, unintentional byproducts. You're going to recover faster. Your body's going to handle it better. You're going to be able to catch yourself more easily. You're not going to get as winded as fast. These are things that are going to automatically happen once you pick a functional training that you want to stick to and you're consistent with. You will have tertiary benefits. For instance, I joke about it all the time. I used to be 300 pounds. I'm not 300 pounds now. I will be in my garage moving crap around, and my first thought is, I could never do this at 300 pounds. That is my functional training. I don't go into the gym going, man, I'm going to be able to pick up a dryer and move it from one side of the garage to the other side of the garage. But in the midst of me picking up a dryer and moving it from one side of the garage to the other side of the garage, because that's what is necessary, I'm like, wow, could never have done that without the gym. There are tertiary benefits that are unintentional, but guaranteed. If you work on a functional platform and you're consistent enough, a lot of things just kind of take care of themselves, right? If you go, hey, I want to eat well enough to where I don't get sick and I can go to the gym and I can recover really fast. Those same nutrients that you're eating to have those consequences will also ensure things like your bones won't be as brittle. Your joints and ligaments won't be as stiff. Your breathing will be under control. So those are things that are unintentional consequences of your intentional programming, right? And so when you're looking at stuff, a lot of times we get stuck in this frame of mind that it's all or nothing, or that if you're not programming for it, you're not going to get the benefit. That's just not true. Your body is an adaptable machine. And if you feed the machine right and you do things for a specific function, there's unintended consequences that come from that, positive consequences that come from that. And, a lot of times I hear this a lot where people are, I want to prepare for a marathon. Why do you want to prepare for a marathon? Well, because I just want to prove that I can do a marathon. Great. Why is that important to people? It's important to people because what they don't realize is as they're preparing for a marathon and they get the marathon done, all of a sudden they're not in pain as much. They can breathe easier. They sleep better. The food that they have to eat to get through a 10-mile training run is different than if they sat on a couch. They're intentional about putting nutrients in that will get them to the end goal. And so their lifestyle is better. And that's why people that run marathons become addicted to running marathons, because if they stop running marathons, then all of that other tertiary stuff falls apart, right? Powerlifters, once they stop powerlifting, all that other stuff falls apart. Bodybuilders, when they stop bodybuilding, all that other stuff falls apart. And we see this in, if you move this into more mental health and spiritual health, like people with jobs, they retire and then everything else falls apart. Why? Because the things that they were doing to be functional for the job stop because they no longer have a purpose to do the things that they used to be functional for the job. It isn't because they got old. It isn't because they retired. It isn't because they're somehow newly sick. It's because they no longer do the things to be purpose-driven. Once you lose your purpose, everything falls apart. And that's what aging is. Losing your purpose is really what we can condemn as aging or getting old or whatever, right? There's that old adage that I really like is like, you don't stop having fun because you got old because you stopped having fun, right? It's the same thing. You didn't stop having purpose because you got old because you stopped having a purpose. Find your usefulness, focus on your function, and you will never get old. right? I joke that my grandpa walked into his grave because he never stopped a purpose. He lost a leg to gangrene. He got cancer. They told him he had 3 months to live. He lasted another 15 years because he never stopped having a purpose. His purpose was, I will be here to pick on my kids. I will be here to be a beacon for my children and for my wife. And he was very adamant about that. And it gave him longevity. If he was just like, I'm just here to waste away, why fucking waste the time? I'm just a burden on my family. I'm just here making it harder on them. Then he would have just wasted away and died within a few months. He had mental fortitude because he had a purpose. He had a function. He had usefulness. That's what the men in my house and my family have always believed and have always taught me. They have always gone above and beyond because they never forget their purpose. And so as you age and as you get older, what is your purpose? Is it just surviving the dog that pulled because it found a rabbit? Is it picking up your grandchildren? Is it just maintenance? I don't want to be weak. And a lot of people, they don't want to accept that, right? They're like, well, that's stupid. Then I'd have to admit that I would be weak. First step is admitting you have a problem, right? Like that's part of it. Like if you don't use it, you will become weak. So if you don't want to be weak, that's a valid function. That's a valid argument, right? That's my dad. My dad is like, I will not be weak. I will not be a burden. So it pushes him to make sure he is not a burden and he's not weak, right? And I know in today's society, a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't feel like a burden, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, you should. It's a powerful motivator if used appropriately. Now, if you're like, I don't want to feel like a burden and then sit down and cry and wallow and don't do anything about it, then yeah, that's a negative connection with that, right? That's a non-useful function. But if you look at that and you're like, this is how I make sure I'm not weak. This is how I make sure I'm not a burden. And you create a program around that. Now you will have longevity. I've been trying to figure this out for a while. Like, I don't understand people that wallow. I don't. And that includes old people. Because the old people in my life don't wallow. What people consider old are not old to me because they don't wallow. So my examples are 50, 60, 70, 80. They're still joking, dancing, laughing, having a good time, and building shit. 50, 60, 70, and 80 in other people's lives are, oh, Papa's peed himself again. Like, I wouldn't want that life. Even if I did piss myself, I'm wearing a diaper and you didn't know it because I won't be a burden for you. And I think a lot of elderly, they lose their purpose and then they fear their death. But they also fear living. Am I just here? If I have no purpose, what is the point? Point is, find your purpose. Find who you want to be and go be that person. There's no point in sticking around if you're not going to make the use of it, right? Make the best of it. Like I think that's what changes. At 50, all of a sudden people flip this switch and they're like, well, I'm 50 now, so I'm not going to make the best of it. It is what it is. But at 20 and 30, people are like still hopeful. They're like, anything is possible, right? Keep that thought process. Anything is possible. When I'm 80, I'm going to be fucking diving with sharks and fucking rappelling off of mountains and shit. Like, that's my goal. Like, if I die doing something fucking cool, great. Right? At least my family's like, fucking Tim walked into his death. That is a much better way to go in my family than he died peacefully in his sleep. I do not want to die peacefully in my sleep. I don't. Sorry, I don't. Because that means I was boring. I don't want to be boring. That's my thought process. It doesn't serve everybody else, but that serves me. And it serves my parents and it serves my family. Like, that's how we see things. We want epic fucking lives. And that doesn't stop because we get old. We want epic lives all the way to the end. We just change how we define epic. Right? Maybe epic is being surrounded by a bunch of little ones. Maybe epic is, everybody talking about how great I once was. I don't know. Like, everybody's different. But for my family, it was always like, I'll still fucking rack you. Like, my grandpa with one leg, dying of cancer, busted out a bunch of push-ups to prove his son was wrong and that he wasn't weak. I want to go like that. 100 push-ups. And my dad and him went at it. My dad couldn't hit 100. My grandpa could. And then my dad talked crap because it's like, well, yeah, if I only had one leg, I wouldn't have as much weight to pick up. That's the dark humor that my family has, right? And they loved it. They loved each other for it because they were able to bond over that. But at the end of the day, my grandpa with cancer did 100 push-ups after sitting in a bed all day for 3 years or in a wheelchair because my grandpa didn't have quit in him. And that's how you should see your functional training. That's how you should age gracefully, as everybody said. Don't age gracefully. Age like a badass. Don't quit. Just keep going. You lose sight of something, go find something new to look at. Right? Matt and I, we've talked about it. I hate bucket lists. Matt does too. Might as well say I quit shit. Like that's what a bucket list is. You quit trying. These are all the things I'm going to do before I die, but I'm not going to actually make, it's a hope list. It'd be cool if. I don't like bucket lists. I like goals. I set dates to shit. I'm going to do these things before I die. When I can. Here's the date that I'm targeting. Hit it or not, at least I know a date. I have something to shoot for. Right? Anyway, I'm passionate about this because I have a lot of people on both sides of the fence. I have people like Tish and Matt that are aging gracefully and badasses. And then I have people that are like, well, I'm 30, so I'm hurting. You know how it is. No, I don't. I'd much rather be like Matt and Tish, who are like, fuck the 20-year-olds. We're going to do what we want to do and we're going to show them up. Than I'm 30 and I'm like, you know how it is. I'm in pain. F that. F that. Anyway, we're 1 minute over. Any last comments or questions, Tish, before I close it out?
No, I think this was great. Very helpful. Certainly inspiring from a sense of like some of the basic things. So I'm good. I'm certainly going to implement some of those for sure with my clients. So thank you for that.
Of course. And again, apologies for being late. I had my meeting run a little bit long, but I'm glad that we were able to get on. And then I'll go ahead and get this posted here on the weekend.
Awesome.
Talk soon.
Well, I will see you in the portal next week. Let's see, what are we doing next week? Fitness, family next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That'll be fun.
Cool. Yeah.
All
We'll
right.
see you.
Talk soon.
Bye.